Hey there, going live from front seat of a car again, like I did back in June, and it's story time live with Dr. Bird. I'm here to read through stories that in the Bible that have to do with sex, what we call marriage, and physical harm that involves intimate body parts. That's what we're talking about because it relates to the book I have coming out in December, Marriage in the Bible. What do the texts say? So let's give it a whirl and see. Hang in there with me for the countdown. So hi, yeah, probably going to be a short one today because I am in a warm car on the side of 460 in West Virginia. I'm not going to lie, and not sure how long my phone is going to hold out in terms of the battery on. It's doing okay. It's doing okay as a hotspot. So anyway, hang on. Don't go anywhere. Okay. Anyway, so it's always something tech with me, isn't it? Anyway, so we're starting the book of Joshua today. We've done Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. We jumped out and did Matthew and the Gospel of John. We did a couple stories from Judges, and now I'm going to go back and make sure we get everything in Joshua, and then we'll do the rest of Judges. So today, starting Joshua, chapter 2. Chapter 1 of Joshua is the Lord telling Joshua to be strong and courageous multiple times, and Joshua is saying that to the people multiple times because they're about to go in and conquer the entire land that they've been promised, right? So what we get, so that's that whole intro, is that whole gird your loins for this fight. Chapter 2 starts like this. Then Joshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute. I'm going to say sex worker, but it's you all. Okay. Enter the house of a sex worker whose name was Rahab and spent the night there. Can we pause for just a moment? Okay. Verse 2 of the narrative of this story has Joshua sending spies into the land to get the lay of the land, if you will. And right off the bat, they go into a brothel, a whorehouse. They go into a place where sex workers work, where predominantly men purchase time with a woman, right? We're 2 verses into the narrative, folks. Don't tell me that sex outside of marriage is a sin, or sex before marriage. Don't tell me that. The Bible does not say that, okay? That's why I'm pausing to laugh about this. It does not say that. In fact, that was a smart move on their part, right? I mean, when I have in-person classes, right? Speaking of which, a little shout out to my friend Scott Elliott at Adrian College for having me teach a couple of his classes yesterday. Yeah, when I'm doing in-person classes with people, we pause to talk about this. Why would 2 spies who've been sent into Jericho, why is that their first move, is to go there, right? And most of the time, someone in the room will say, well, sex workers hear things, and men, men go there and they get stuff off their mind, or whatever, however you want to put it, right? Second verse of the narrative. Okay. Right. Let's take that seriously, shall we? Let's not just brush that aside as no big deal, and then just kind of be okay with the fact that they're embracing it in the narrative. The writers of the narrative are embracing it. Okay. Maybe we should just kind of get comfortable with that instead of being uncomfortable with the fact that it's there and trying to find a reason not to acknowledge it. What do you think? Okay, so they go spend the night there. I'm sure by themselves in a bed. Sure they didn't share the bed with anyone. The king of Jericho was told, some Israelites have come here tonight to search out the land. Then the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, as you do when you're the king and you know the Madam of the whorehouse? Well, I don't know, right? He said, bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come only to search out the whole land. They're not actually coming for some action. They're just checking things out. But the woman took the 2 men and hid them. Then she said, true, the men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. And when it was time to close the gate at dark, the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you can overtake them. She had, however, brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. This is a really interesting little detail in the story because there are 2 other men in the scriptures who are protected in this very same way. I'm drawing a blank on the second one, and the second one is in the Hebrew Bible. And the third one is Saul, who becomes known as Paul in the book of Acts, when the narrative says that the Jews are after him. And so someone protects him on a roof and lets him out. Kind of interesting, actually, I think. Anyway. So the men pursued them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords. As soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before they went to sleep, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that dread of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before you. It's a really interesting piece of propaganda, right? To put into the mouth of someone who's about to be conquered the fear of the God of the people who are about to conquer you, right? For we've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. As soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no courage left in any of us because of you. The Lord, your God, is indeed God in heaven above and on earth below. Again, really clever piece of propaganda here, right? To have this woman narrating. I'm sorry that the screen is shaking so much. I'm trying to find a good way to do this, and it's kind of hard to do in this car. Yeah, so they have the woman, right? This woman narrating exactly what you would want a foreign person to narrate, right? Exactly what you would want someone in the land that you're trying to conquer to acknowledge, right? That this God of yours can't be defeated. You guys are we know you're the shit, right? And so whether or not, I mean, I don't think this actually took place historically speaking. So, but let's pretend it's taking place, right? Whether or not she actually believes that doesn't matter, right? She knows how to tell people what they want to hear, right? Okay, it's kind of how she makes a living. So, yeah, right. So the Lord your God is indeed God in heaven above and on earth below, right? Now then, since I have dealt kindly with you, swear to me by the Lord, right? She's invoking their God, that you in turn will deal kindly with my family. Give me a sign of good faith that you will spare my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. This is a really serious, impressive political move, right? Opening scene of one of the most important stories, biblically speaking. It's being run by a sex worker. I just think we should take that more seriously than we do. Right? Okay. The men said to her, our life for yours. If you do not tell this business of ours, then we will deal kindly and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the outer side of the city wall, and she resided within the wall itself. She said to them, go toward the hill country so that the pursuers may not come upon you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way. The men said to her, we will be released from this oath that you have made us swear to you if we invade the land and you do not tie this crimson cord in the window through which you let us down, and you do not gather into your house your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family. If any of you go out of the doors of your house into the street, they shall be responsible for their own death, and we shall be innocent. But if a hand is laid upon any who are with you in the house, we shall bear the responsibility for their death, which is kind of a funny thing to say, because if they're dead, there's no, but anyway, it's a nice offer, right? If you tell us business of ours, then we shall be released from this oath that you made us swear to you. She said, according to your words, so be it. She sent them away, and they departed. Then she tied the crimson cord in the window. We could have all kinds of little side conversations about the role of crimson cords and windows. When did that start? Historically speaking, I actually don't know. I just find it really interesting. Okay, I'm going to keep going because I do have a couple more minutes that I can manage the temperature here. They departed and went into the hill country and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers had searched all along and found all along the way and found nothing. Then the two men came down again from the hill country. They crossed over, came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him all that had happened to him. I wonder, though, which pieces they might have left out of that story. Then they said to Joshua, truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before us. Right? It's very exciting. So then we have this whole thing, right? The next couple chapters. Early in the morning, Joshua rose, set out from Shittim with all the Israelites that came to the Jordan. And we have this story narrating the Israelites crossing the Jordan in a very similar way to the way the Israelites part the sea and pass through it, with Moses leading. So you have major body of water, Moses parting the sea, people delivered on the other side. Now we have the next in line, Joshua, smaller body of water, but we still have a really impressive, miraculous, stopping of the water, passing through on dry ground, delivering the people onto the other side, kind of a symbolic way of saying, what God did before with Moses, he can do again here, and he is doing again with Joshua. The power or the promise or the whatever is being passed along to Joshua. So you get this really, kind of fun story, but it doesn't pertain to my filters, so I'm going to skip over it. But that's chapters 3 and 4. And then we have more people in Canaan being narrated, starting in chapter 5, of, just melting, they're melting in their hearts because they're just so afraid of the Lord. So this plays well into the narrative of Joshua, which is similar to what happened in the book of Exodus, showing that God was stronger than the Egyptian gods or can overpower them. We have a similar thing happening here in the prelude, or the leading up to the Israelites conquering Canaan. So we have all this thing going on. I'm laughing because I keep there's actually an interesting reference to needing to recircumcise all the men. It's not, again, doesn't really relate, but it kind of does relate, since circumcision, it's about the covenant, but it's also intimately related to whether or not people can marry each other within this framework. So maybe we should read that. Chapter 5. When all the kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts melted. Ah! And there was no longer any spirit in them because of the Israelites. They're just fainting with fear, right? At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites a second time. So Joshua made flint knives, didn't even, okay, that's interesting, right? Doesn't even push back on that. And circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Ha'araloth. This is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the warriors, had died during the journey through the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt. Although all the people who came out had been circumcised, yet all the people born on the journey through the wilderness after they come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the Israelites traveled 40 years in the wilderness, until all the nation, the warriors who came out of Egypt, perished, not having listened to the voice of the Lord. To them, the Lord swore that he would not let them see the land that he had sworn to their ancestors to give us. Notice the us in the narrative there. A land flowing with milk and honey. So it was their children whom he raised up in their place that Joshua circumcised. For they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. I mean, if you didn't catch it the first 2 times we said it, we just gave you a couple more times. Just so you know, these men of Israel were uncircumcised and need to be circumcised. When the circumcising of all the nation was done, again, there's that reference to all the nation, as if only men count in this people, which they only the men do count, right? When they take the census of all the men, all the whole congregation of Israel, it's just the men, right? Women and children don't count. Women and actually children, even males under 20, didn't count in the census. So they can, the narrator can say that, right? They can say when the circumcising of all the nation was done, because only men count as actual people in the nation. When the circumcising was done, they remained in their places in the camp until they were healed. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt." So that place is called Gilgal to this day, a play on the verb to roll. Okay. So there's no more about sex or marriage or anything related to it in the rest of chapter 5. So we'll keep going for a few more minutes. How are we doing, folks? Flint can't be found in in the wilderness. That's a really good point, right? They're out in the desert. How do you find? Yeah, where do you find Flint? So chapter 6 of Joshua is where you get this miraculous destruction of the walls simply by marching around and shouting and blowing your horns, as if the resonance of the sound is going to like exactly meet the the walls aren't going to resist the resonance of the trumpets or something. I don't know. Anyway, so chapter 6 of Joshua, if you've never read it, that's the chapter you want to go read about the walls of Jericho falling. I know that some people grow up being taught to play out this scene, right? To march around the fellowship hall or wherever you are in the church, whatever space, and just march around the room 6 times, and on the 7th yell and scream or whatever and blow your trumpets and your instruments, and then the walls of Jericho magically fall down, right? From what I've heard, I didn't have to do that as a child, but I know some of my former students have, and they talk about, they don't talk about what happens next. So I'm going to pick up on verse 15 of chapter 6. So they did all the things leading up to this. Joshua wrote in verse 12, Joshua rose early in the morning. The priest took up the ark of the Lord, 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord passed on. So they're doing these things day after day, right? Marching around like the Lord told them through Joshua, blowing the trumpets continually. The armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord. So they're all marching around. All these men are marching around with their, I don't know if they have their weapons, but they have the trumpets and the priests, and they have the ark of the Lord at the back. All this great stuff, right? On the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and then returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. Okay. So on the 7th day, verse 15, they rose early at dawn and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. It was only on that day that they marched around the city 7 times. Very important. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout! For the Lord has given you the city! The city and all that is in it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction." Because that's what you do. You destroy everything, right? And notice what is also a part of this narrative. Only Rahab, the sex worker, and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers we sent. It's kind of an awkward thing to be yelling through the bullhorn, Oh yeah, when our spies went to check things out, they made a promise with the sex workers, so we got to protect them. Yeah. But other than that, kill everything else, right? Like, how ridiculous is that? As for you, keep away from the things devoted to destruction, so as not to covet and take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel an object for destruction, bringing trouble upon it. Don't take any of the things you're not supposed to take. But all silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord. Of course they are, because those are all really valuable, right? Sorry, I'm in criticism mode because I've got these conversations in the back of my head. It's a really interesting thing to start yelling at the people, right? shall go into the treasury of the Lord. All the precious things that we're about to go take from the people we're about to go slaughter, right? Okay. So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpets, they raised a great shout, and the wall fell down flat. So the people charged straight ahead into the city and captured it. Then they devoted to destruction by the edge of the sword all in the city, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, "Go into the sex worker's house and bring the woman out of it and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." So the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, along with her father, her mother, her brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought all her kindred out and set them outside the camp of Israel. They burned down the city and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute, sex worker, with her family and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared. Did you count how many times we've just referred to Rahab and her occupation? The narrator makes sure that we all know that Rahab has been protected. And of course, in the narrative, politically, propagandistically speaking, of course, they're going to, because she's, even if it was faked, she has said that she is afraid of their Lord and knows that their God is great and all that stuff, right? But what I care about is the fact that there's no missing the fact that she's a sex worker or that she's the madam over the sex workers. This is important to me because people want to deny that sex is handled much more openly in the Hebrew Bible or in the Christian Bibles, Christian testaments, than people. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. People don't want to be okay with talking about what's actually happening here. People want to pretend that there's no sex happening outside of marriage because that's certainly none that God would be okay with, but it's actually essential to the storyline, so much so that she is protected. She and her family are protected. We could have a whole separate conversation about why it is that any person of any gender chooses to be a sex worker. That's a whole nother conversation, in my opinion. But in terms of what the Bible attests to, I don't think there's any way you can tell me that God frowns upon sex that is happening outside of marriages because there's a sex worker who's being saved. Period. Okay, just a thought. Joshua then pronounced this oath, saying, sorry, I skipped over a couple verses. So back up to verse 25. But Rahab the prostitute, the sex worker, with her family and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared. Her family, or she, but she and her, right, has lived in Israel ever since. For she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out to Jericho. They're not even saying because she was afraid of because she worshipped our God, right? They're saying because she protected us, so we're going to protect her. And there you have it. I just think it's really, really interesting. So Joshua then pronounced this oath, saying, "Cursed before the Lord be anyone who tries to build this city, this Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and at the cost of the youngest he shall set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. And Joshua and Rahab are the two main characters and people who are talked about in those 5 chapters. I just think that is worth thinking about. Saint Rahab, yes, patron of the sex workers. Exactly. It is valuable. Yeah. So I'm reading comments. The author supported sex work. Exactly. Okay, I know it's short, but I'm hot and I want to hit the road. Get back on the road. So I'm going to do that. Thanks for joining me. Those of you who are here live, who wanted to be here live, who are, Thanks for watching later if if you're seeing this later, and thanks for supporting me in all the various ways that you all do, showing up, chatter on the videos, passing along to friends, subscribing to my channel, supporting me on Patreon at Biblical Bird, or purchasing my second book in Audible. So all really lovely things that help me. So I appreciate that. I will be back on Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, for more from the book of Joshua. See you then.